OCM. Week welke zaten Shishwapen Ken, Renquest Checheleches. In a few words, I know Shishwapen Sheen. I've introduced myself, my traditional name, given me my great-grandfather Johnny Peters, relatives from this territory in Seabird. My name, when I get paychecks, is Dr. Richard Vidan. I'm emeritus at UBC School of Social Work. And I have the honor of acknowledging myself as a guest in the territory of our coastal Salish relatives, the people of the Rivergrass, the Musqueam. And I look forward to this evening. And we've got a nice crowd here, the full circle. And it's good that you should be in a complete circle because this was how it was done back when I was here 52 years ago as a graduate student at the School of Social Work. This was the audio-visual room. So, yeah, I was a teenager then. I am an Aboriginal veteran. I'm going to say a prayer just to get ourselves established. And you're the boss of you. So, Wake te Kelkukpi, Wakatonka te Conchula, Gitchimanatu, Allah, Yahweh, Io. Highest power, we know by many names. Your son Checheleches, I come before you a humble human being to give you thanks for the gifts of this day, to give you thanks for the gifts of the four directions, and ask you to help us see and hear with understanding, to feel with warmth and compassion, and to look within with courage and conviction that we can take our steps in a good way. I give thanks to all the healthcare workers, all those taking care of the rest of us, all of those in harm's way, for the peacemakers, the prisoners, the hostages, the people of Ukraine, Europe, Russia, Israel, Palestine, the people of the world. Kukstam to all my relations. Oh.
Thank you, Richard. I just wanted to introduce the coordinating committee of this series of the Green College. They have colleges emeritus here, and we have Dr. Judith Hall with us, and she's one of the three coordinators, and Richard Badan and myself, and the three of us have found this quite an exciting time to be together, and we learn a lot from you and from each other, especially in the area as it relates to intergenerational trauma and now resilience as well. So through the performance tonight, you may excuse, maybe it's not a performance, a presentation, but in the presentation tonight, notice how what Professor Belliveau is going to be presenting is a kind of, in my view, a process of resilience development which we use with the veterans in the areas of music and theater, and George has been a big part of the creation of that. And we're very proud to have him as a colleague, and because he's helped us move a little bit forward how people can recover parts of self that have taken them away for a while. So welcome to the rest of you, and to all of the people out in the zone out there. There's people zooming in tonight who are watching us, and they've joined us, so there's probably all of us and then all of them. And then I want to now introduce the presenter tonight. This George Belliveau I mentioned, and I have colleagues, he's colleagues with all of us. And what I would like to say that his focus tonight in his presentation is this performative session explores a culture's resilience and its challenges to hold on to its identity and language. Using research-based theater, the performance brings to life intergenerational narratives, highlighting moments of disruption, recognition, and growth. So, with that, I want to welcome you, and you have your own mic, so you don't need this. And there you go.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah.
Testing. Okay, that's good. Okay. You have no partner? Oh, no. That's okay. Okay, I think we're 30 more seconds. 30 seconds. Oh, I'm sorry, some of you did not have a partner. We should have got groups of 3 there, but... I'm just going to need those in a second, these piece of paper. Okay, I'm just going to ask you to wrap it up. Thank you. Thank you. All right. The stories are continuing, and it's beautiful. The people in the front row, during the piece, this is deliberate as well, that there's a moment, so you're going to help me out as I'm creating the piece, and there's a moment that I grew up playing ice hockey, the Canadian game, one of the Canadian games. I guess lacrosse could be also one. But there's going to be a moment where I'm going to need your last names as well. So at some point, I'm going to be stick handling, and I'm going to go, Belliveau prend la rondelle, il passe à Leblanc, qui passe à... Oh, à Belliveau, à Conrad. Okay, so on va continuer. So that'll come in. So those in the second row, you might not be part of the hockey game, but I might flip the puck over there. You never know. So the other thing, there's one moment in the piece where, because these are all about stories, they're about stories of my ancestors, and there's another moment in the piece where I say, "Did you know?" And then it's just, I'm going to ask if we can just whisper that, did you know? It's going to begin here, did you know? And then you gift it to the other person, they receive it, and then did you know, did you know, did you know? It's going to go fairly fast. It's going to go like this, it's going to go shh, like that, and it's going to go around. But I would love to invite you to use whatever language you would prefer using, because we have multiple languages in the space. Feel free to use English, but if you have another language that you would like to know, the same line, did you know? And then we're just going to hear it in a moment. Because the piece that I'm going to be sharing is mainly in English, but it's about being French, English, being in between, and being Acadien. So this, did you know? So the instructions are fairly, I think, straightforward. Did you know? And we're just going to pass it all the way around. It's going to go very quickly. It's like a... So, are you ready?
Yeah.
So, did you know? And then you'll just pass it on. No, there's nothing. There's only the question. Yeah. And then. And then Dawn has it there. Yeah. I counted 9 languages, and I think I might have missed a few of them. Thank you for sharing that. So it's going to come in the piece. I will forewarn you when it's going to come, and then it allows me to do a scene shift at that point. So it's a bit of a trick in theater that we use. So, but it's going to come later on. So, and I didn't know many things before I started this project. I had a lot, as we dig into history, there's always, you think of the French Acadians, they were deported in 1755, they went to Louisiana, and then you go, no, that's not actually really part of the history. Before they went to Louisiana, the French Acadians who were in present-day Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, they actually, some of them went to Virginia, they went to the U.S. in Virginia, they went to England on another boat, they went to France, and they went to different places, and then they went to Louisiana, and then some came back. and the Caribbean. You're going to hear that in the play as well. And that's when I did not know a lot of those stories, and I still don't know a lot. So that's why the did you know is important. The other piece, that's a very good insight. Very few people know about the Caribbean and the Acadians, so we'll have to talk after this. So the other piece is that I say a line that it says, memories, they shift with time. And at that point, I'm going to be transitioning from one role to another, and I would invite us to do it collectively. So I'm going to be sitting in the chair. I'm going to be right here, and I'm going to be playing Jean Leblanc, one of my ancestors through my mother's lineage, and I'm going to be on Belliveau, a beautiful island off the coast of Brittany, and Jean Leblanc is going to say, memories, they shift with time. And he's going to get out of role, and he's going to just stand there. And I'm just going to look at you, and I'm going to go, memories, they shift with time. And I'm going to ask you to repeat. Memories, they shift with time. And we're going to say it twice. And the second time? Memories, they shift with time. Okay, that's it. You're brilliant. You are cast in my, it was a one-person piece, but now it's like a huge collective. So there's going to be last names to help to build the story, because it's not only mon histoire, it's votre histoire. There's also did you know, and there's lots of things we don't know, and then there's memories, they shift with time. That's 3 things already I'm asking of you, so I'm not going to load it up further. Okay, there's another moment in the piece where I ask what is home? And because being Acadien, being French Acadian, home has shifted with time. And also being in between, for me, I grew up completely in French. I grew up in a French village of 5,000 people outside of Moncton. There was one Anglais, Louis l'Anglais. That's the only Anglais that I knew growing up. So I went to a French school. All my relatives, I have 42 cousins, very big Catholic Acadian families. So we were very French. So then I was exposed to English, and so you're always caught in between. My story is your story. Many people here live in between languages, in between cultures. And so what I'd like you to do to warm us up a little bit, when I think of home, I think of what is home? Is it a place? Is it a feeling? Is it my imagination? So what I was going to do, and I think just in the expediency of time, I'm just going to ask you to turn to your partner again. And those who didn't have a partner, I apologize. We're going to make it work this time. Either we'll have groups of 3. Just to take a moment, and I'm aware that home can be complicated for some people. So I would ask you to take care of yourself. I think Richard started the evening by saying just take care of yourself. So please don't necessarily put yourself into a triggered position, because home can be complicated. But I just want you to think about home and the breath it brings. I think of home, and it brings this. I still think of Acadia as home, although I've lived much more than my life outside of Acadia. So if you just take a moment of what is home, what's the word that might come to mind, and just turn to your partner, and you may choose to just to sit it out if it's complicated for you. Okay? Just take a moment. What is home? So 30 more seconds. We're going to, 30 seconds. Okay, I'm just going to ask you to wrap it up, please. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that and breathing some life into the space with just some reflections on what is home for you today, what it means to you. I've put down a blanket on the floor. I know that if you're in the second row, you can just stand up. You can see it if you can't see it from there. It's a patterned blanket. So I have 3 images as I build this piece called Mon Histoire, Ton Histoire, that I want you to think about these images. And they're shifting. The piece that I'm sharing is in development, meaning that I just did it last night, actually, for Le Centre de la Francophonie, for a bit of more of a French audience. And some of the things that I did last night are going to shift today because I was influenced by who was in the space and what they shared. But one image that I have is, if you can imagine a 17th century ship. And I know there's some people in this room that could probably describe a 17th century ship much better than I do. Chris, I would rely on you. And if you imagine a porthole, and then that 17th century ship, there's several other ships behind it, and they're crossing the Atlantic. But there's one porthole, and there's someone looking out that porthole. And then on the other side, I'm going to step on the other side of the blanket. Let's imagine it's Atlantic. There's ships going the other direction. So coming from this way, they're 21st century ships. They're cruise liners, much bigger boats. And there's one porthole that someone's looking out there too. And there's several cruise lines. There's lots of movement. In that space, that in-between space, between the 17th century and the 21st century, is where the piece that I'm sharing exists. It exists in time that floats back and forth. But it is but a glimpse of one story, of many stories, many boats, many journeys, many migrations, many intergenerational stories that pass between time. So that's the first image that I want you to imagine, this theatrical space. In theater, one of the beauties of theater is that time can be both present, past, and future simultaneously. And the other image that I'm playing with is the idea of a garden. And I think we all have images of a garden, different kinds of gardens. So the garden that I'm imagining is this project. I'm using 5 years to develop this project. I'm in year 2. I've done a lot of digging, of reading and interviewing people, and now I'm performatively trying to bring it to life. So I'm in year 2. And my garden has been kind of hoed. I've worked different parts of the garden. It's kind of boundaryless, but at the same time I have to contain it, because otherwise it's just going to grow too big. And I've had the luxury of having various people work with me, including Lon is in the space today, who worked with me, and amongst several others, who we're starting to nurture different parts of the garden. And certain ones need a little bit of feeding. Some of them I'm going to have to draw out. People have way more knowledge than I do about different areas, and they're going to help me see different areas and grow different areas. In the end, the piece is going to change with the seasons, but the garden is a very powerful image for me. And being from the land, a culture as the Acadians were from the land, it's a very important metaphor for me, this garden. I'm going to have one more image that you're going to help me out with in a moment. But before we go back, one last thing I'm going to ask you to share with a partner. And for those who are finding that a little kind of frustrating, I'll hold that, but I do feel that it brings an energy and it gets us to speak a little bit. The last thing that I'd like you to share with your partner is an ancestor. I'd like you to think about a grandparent, perhaps, an uncle, an aunt, someone who resonates with you, that there's something that either you have this memory that I remember something, and that ancestor really kind of it brings a particular sensation to you. And again, please take care of yourself. For some of you, when I ask about an ancestor, it can become triggering. Let's try to stay in a space where you're going to be well. But I want you to think about an ancestor, because the piece that I'm playing with deals with a lot of my ancestors and the stories of my ancestors. So whoever that ancestor is, and I'm trying to give you a bit of time to think about it, just what is one moment? So as an example, my grandfather on my father's side, Mac or Max, because my grandfather was illiterate and couldn't read or write, so his name it varied depending how you would read it, how he would scroll it. But I always have this image, this strong image of my grandfather. He was a fairly small in stature, but really big in life and big in character. And just the way he would pile the wood, because they heated their home with wood, and just the wisdom that he brought to how we would split the wood, what time of the year you needed to do it, but also just the stacking of the wood and just spending lots of time with my grandpa as a kid stacking wood. So that memory, I'm smelling the wood as I'm telling you right now. I'm in the shed where that wood was being stacked. So can I indulge you one last time to turn to a partner and think about an ancestor, someone that brings resonance to you right now, that speaks to you. So again, if you're in groups of 3, that's fine also. So we'll just take 2 more minutes and then last one. So 30 more seconds to finish the stories. So 10 more seconds. Okay, I'm just going to ask you to wrap up your stories. We're wrapping up our stories. Thank you. And thank you for being listeners. In the telling of a story, the listener, of course, is so important. And in a lot of the work that several people here do, the similar work that I do in drama education, it is often about receiving and giving and receiving. And the beauty is that space in between the giving and the receiving, where there's lots of mirror neurons that are fired between the giving and the receiving. And that's where the gift giving is. And in that space is that in-between space that we talk about theoretically and methodologically. And the piece that I'll be sharing is in between the giving of stories. And my father just turned 80 this year. And My father was never a storyteller, though in his last few years, he is very imparting a lot of stories to us. And my sister and I have been trying to pull out as many stories from my dad. We know how important that is. Tetsuro has written a beautiful play about the father-son relationship. And so the stories that my father, I just need to prompt him with one story, and it begets other stories, and many stories are emerging. And it's beautiful to see these interconnections. Some are difficult stories, of course, but it's the interconnectivity. Okay, so I've asked that was the last task that I've asked you for. I just want to speak very, very briefly, because this is partly a scholarly talk as well, that I anchor the work that I do in a paradigm that does borrow from qualitative approaches, but it moves much more towards what we call performative approaches. And the performative approaches honor whatever stories that I'm collecting, the data that I'm collecting, the insights, I prefer calling it, but it also honors the process of working with the material through a theatrical lens. So as I'm working with Lon on this piece, as I'm discovering the data or the stories that I have, I also try to find life in the doing of the work through the performative frame. Because the principles of the methodology that I use, you can take notes now if you wanted to, or not. I call it research-based theater, which borrows from performative inquiry, artography. It's one of these arts-based methods. Though two key commitments of doing the work, and you'll see it represented very shortly, is that I need to honor the research that I'm doing. If I'm talking about the French Acadians, and I've dug into history textbooks, archives, etc., I need to honor it ethically. I need to honor the people ethically as I can. And I need to honor the art form of theater, to using the mechanisms of theater. So in those two commitments, if something would be really theatrical, if I just bent time to make it more theatrical, I'm not committing myself to the research anymore. I'm doing fictional theater, which is fine, it's beautiful, but it's no longer research-based theater, which is what, for me, situates it within the academy, my dual life as an artist and as a researcher. And also, if I'm doing research and I'm only spewing out the facts that I've discovered, not using the art form of theater, then I'm not using theater. I'm using maybe interactive elements, but I'm not using the 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years of the development of theater, which is so rich. So this intermarrying of research and theater is the methodology that I use, and it's been certainly influenced by lovely scholars well before me. So maybe I'll just end it there, because I'm going to show what I'm wanting to share with you, and at the end we can have a discussion if people want to talk about one or the other. I'm just going to look at my notes again, that I didn't forget anything that's super important. Nope. All right, so I'm going to let go this mic, unfortunately, for you online, because I can't perform with the mic. So I'm just on time. It's 5:35, and the piece is about 25 minutes long. I said I was going to do one more image, and the final image is the following. And actually, the people in the front row, you might be able to help me out with this, is that this piece is a collection of years of history, years of stories. And over the last year and a half, 2 years, I've been reading a ton of books on Acadians. I've been talking to as many Acadians as I can. I've been interviewing people, going to archives. My wife, Sue, is with me. We've gone to every historical site you can imagine on the Acadians. She's had to travel with me. And so I've been digging all this information on the Acadians. And what I'm going to share with you tonight, can I ask those who are in the front, we're just going to lift up this blanket. Those who are wanting to help me out to lift the blanket. So there's all this kind of data here. And I've been trying to lift it up to try to make sense with it, with the performative piece. And then we're just going to just bunch it a little bit together. And then there's all your stories that you've influenced me with. So we're going to put it here. I'm just going to take it from you. Thank you so much. All right. So all these stories are here. This is 400 or 500 years of stories that are in this piece, and I'm going to do this. I'm taking one piece of this story, of this complex story, and for the next 25 minutes I'm going to share it with you. This one little piece. And I'm looking at it, I can only look at it from the lens that I'm standing in, with the light. So I'm looking at it from this lens. Though sometimes I might be able to cheat and look at it from here and it's going to be a slightly different story. And then sometimes I can look at it from here and it's going to be a different story. So what I'm going to share with you is just a sliver. It's a glimpse of my ancestral Acadian story. Thank you. Mark, I'm going to leave that chair, unfortunately. Yeah. Mon histoire, ton histoire. I have kept a journal since the age of 18. I keep them all at home in this old suitcase that's now overflowing. This was my very first journal. Inside it holds memories, pencil sharpeners, stories, brochures, phone numbers. Now I've shared some of these stories in the past, though some will forever remain safe between these covers. Now I'm not going to hold you hostage all evening by reading entire entries in my journal, though I'd like to share a few of them with you. Ones that spark vivid memories. Like this one right here. This is a fun one, I promise. It's 1986. Madonna is at the top of the charts with Papa Don't Preach. Top Gun is a blockbuster hit, and Phantom of the Opera has just opened on the West End. And I am fresh from high school graduation at École High School Mathieu Martin. And I am heading to Université en anglais, leaving behind my French Acadian village. Sure, I can do the monologue again. To be or not to be? That is la question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings against the arrows. Ice hockey was my life. And I went to université thinking I would play hockey and study engineering. But during the first week of the first semester, the theater program was still auditioning. Now, it looks like they were short or maybe desperate for more men in the program. So I figured I had done some theater in high school. I'll take my chance. Completely unprepared, I raced from the hockey rink to the audition, and there, with the great confidence, I butchered Shakespeare. The saving grace was I could take direction. Okay. So do it like Jesus on the cross. I tried. To be or not to be? That c'est la question. Enough. I was in! And guess what? For the first term class project, I was cast as Orsino in Twelfth Night. Yeah, Shakespeare again. If music be the food of love, play on. If music be the food of love, play on. Give me excessive. Give me excessive of it, of it, of it. 3 months later, with lots of voice coaching, my diction and rhythm began to improve rapidly. If music be the food of love, play on. Give me excessive. Give me excessive of it, and so die. I needed to lose my French accent. I wanted to perfect the English language because that would give me bigger roles, larger roles, maybe even lead roles. Over the last few years in rereading my journals, I've been wondering, what else did I leave behind in this desperate quest to lose my French accent? Belliveau, il prend la rondelle, il passe à le blanc. Qui passe ça? Oh, à Belliveau. Oh, à Belliveau. Ah, et à. Oh, merci, et à Hirschler. À Hirschler, et à. Ah, il ne sait pas. Alors, il prend la rondelle, il la met là. Ah, merci, et à. Abdi Deleuze, silence, continue. Okay, did you know that Français, French, my mother tongue, I'm told it's the 5th most spoken language in the world. Yeah, Français goes much beyond la France and the Tour Eiffel and the croissant and la baguette. In French, there are 300 million speakers. Attends, 2 more born in Acadie, 3 in Avignon, 2 more in the Congo. Okay, 300 million speakers and counting. They are spread over 5 continents, in 100 countries and regions in the world. And now, French in all those vast geographies has many variations. In Canada, par exemple, we have the Québécois. There is the Franco-Ontarien. J'ai pris mon car aujourd'hui au lieu de prendre la bus. And then there's the Franco-Manitoba, Alberta, the Métis, and then there's also the Acadien français, the Acadian French, mon patois, cousin to the Cajuns. And Acadien said, parmi vous autres, ce beau monde ici, c'est something ça, hein, être un Acadien parmi vous autres. I'd like to now introduce you to one of my ancestors, Jean Leblanc. I'd like to introduce you to Jean. Now, Jean, before I introduce you to Jean, I will need to give you a bit of background, but Jean Leblanc we will meet in 1765 in Belliveau en Mer, the island off the coast of Brittany. So in 1765, we are going to meet Jean Leblanc. But before we meet Jean, I need to give you a little bit of background. So Jean's ancestors, they came from the region of Poitou, the northwest of France, in La Rochelle. During the 1600s, Jean Leblanc's family, along with many others in that region, they were tired of the imposed taxes, lack of land. So, along with several families, Jean Leblanc's ancestors took the cross-Atlantic journey and made their way across the Atlantic. And in time, they arrived. And with the help of the local indigenous peoples, Jean's ancestors made Atlantic Canada. And eventually they called it Acadie. Acadie, in Mi'kmaq, means fertile land. So Acadie. Now the land and the relationship with the Mi'kmaq peoples, it shaped the Acadians' language, their identity, and their outlook on life. And Jean is born in 1722. During the prosperous years of Acadie, the golden age, and the Acadians at that point had distanced themselves from the French, and they were the politics and independence, and they were remaining neutral in Acadie. And they thrived, the Acadians, until 1755. In 1755, after years of dispute of who owned this land, this Acadian land, the British decided to forcibly remove all the Acadians, including Jean Leblanc's family, due to their association with the French. So Acadian villages are destroyed, and 12,000 Acadians are packed onto ships, scattered in various directions. American colonies, the Caribbeans, as well as Europe. And Jean Leblanc and his family, they are first deported to Richmond, Virginia. And then a year later, they go to Bristol, England, where they stay for 7 years in the port. Then to France, first to Nantes, then Molin, and then eventually to Belliveau in 1765. And this is where we will meet Jean. One last thing. In 1765, the king, Louis XV, he had subsidized 78 families, Acadian families, to repopulate Belliveau, previously British owned. He provided the homes, land to the Acadians, yet they had to go through an interview. Because the interview was there to make sure that the Acadians were legitimate refugees before they were given the land. These records from these interviews of these 78 families, the records still exist. And less than a month ago, I visited those records in France, saw the ink that those records were written down on in 1765, where Jean Leblanc took place in the interview. Jean Leblanc, 1765, Belliveau-en-Mer. Ah oui, je suis bien Jean Leblanc, né le 4 septembre 1722, Port-Royal. Ah oui, je suis certain. J'ai tourné 44 cette année. I gather that some of you, your français is comme ci, comme ça? Yes, indeed, I am Jean Leblanc. Born 4th September 1722, Port-Royal. Yes, I'm sure. I just turned 44 this year. I'm no longer a spring rabbit. The translation, you see, is never perfect. The interviews took place in a former stable, now the town hall, in the parish called Le Palais. With but one window, candles were used, even in daylight hours, creating shadowy figures as Jean tried to answer their questions. Pardon? Yes, my father's name is Joseph Leblanc. Yes, I'm sure. Joseph à Pierre à Daniel. Daniel was the first Leblanc to make it to Acadie. Birth year. I can't remember. Before me, though. Died, yes, 1 month before the expulsion, so August 1755. Mother's name, Marie, born Belliveau from La Grande Prairie. Are you trying to trick me? Yes, I'm sure. Marie Amélie Belliveau. Birth year. I can't remember. Yes, she died just 3 months ago, so September 1765. 10 kids. 5 before me and 4 after. Their names. Yes, yes. Let me take it. So first there was Pierre, the oldest. Céline, Simon first, then Simon. Louis, then me, Jean. Then there was the twins, Jean-Baptiste and Marie-Yvonne. And then Thierry. And then Angélique was the baby. 30 years. The interviews went on for over an hour, with at least 10 of them sitting there asking Jean questions, which understandably made him feel a little nervous. It felt like an inquisition, as if Jean had committed some kind of crime. Felt echoes of being locked up in the Grand Pré church prior to the expulsion came in and out of Jean's mind. Abbé Lelouch and Jean-Marie, the notaire from Paris, were asking the majority of the questions, along with other bureaucrats and fonctionnaires from other parts of Belliveau. To Jean's delight, there were also friendly Acadian faces there to witness and to confirm certain facts. And they would jump in at times to remind Jean certain things. Jean, your petit frère, your little brother, was born in 1738, same year as me. So the scribes, they would be writing down everything that Jean said, which made him feel un peu important. So he eventually eased into his role. Yes, I was married 1742 in Beaubassin. Marie-Jeanne Melançon, the most beautiful person in toute l'Acadie. I remember the first time I met Marie-Jeanne au la Baie Française. Yes, she was born 2 years after me, so 1724. Our kids. At this point, it became a little emotional for Jean, because you see, his 12 kids are scattered un peu partout. And because of the tumultuous back and forth, some had perished along the way. Our oldest son, Pierre, he never left l'Acadie. He was only 13. He managed to hide in the forest with others from our village. 10 years. I've not seen Pierre for 10 years. We are told that he is safe. He is living now in La Miramichi, in Acadie, with, he's married, he has kids. I'm a grandpa. So imagine, I want you to imagine those scribes listening to story after story of parents and grandparents sharing some of the most beautiful, difficult stories. This reminiscing, this remembering, though, it did bring the Acadian community on Belliveau a little closer together. It allowed them to remember l'Acadie, their paradise for a century and a half, and to let it go. It allowed them to let go of the painful memories of the expulsion, the loss of their homes. It allowed them, because now it was out of their bodies. It was written down, recorded. The questions went on regarding Jean's other children, and he tried to answer them as best as he could, fighting tears at times, thinking of his oldest daughter, Céline, who, on the voyage between Richmond and Bristol, had perished along the way, and upon arrival in the port town, smallpox was ravaging, which then took 2 other of Jean's children. Though in recalling his youngest 2, Tijan and Sophie, who still lived with him on Belliveau, it brought him warmth as the interview was concluding. Jean and Sophie singing our traditional Acadian songs with their mom to their cousins on the island, that means the world to me. Yes, I will let Marie-Jeanne know that she can come in. Now, she might tell you a different story, because memories, they shift with time. Memories, they shift with time. Home. What is home? It seems like a constant quest. Because you see, many of us live in between. As an Acadian, we've lived most of our lives in between Français, Anglais, ici, puis là, here and there. Living in between is in our blood. The salty marshes, the land that the Acadians thrived on between ocean and land. I've lived now more than half my life outside of L'Acadie, though I always have a foot there. Is it nostalgia? Or is it home? You see, being Acadien is not necessarily about place or geography. It's a way of being inherited from our ancestors, passed down. Our culture has always been on the move, with a resiliency to endure, to adapt, and to be okay with being here and there. And you, I'm curious. Do you sometimes feel like you're living here and there, in between? I'm going to share one last piece from a journal. Not this journal, but a more recent journal. It's going to be 1994. And I'm going to take you to my grandparents' home in Memramcook, New Brunswick, outside of Moncton. 1994 was the year the first smartphone came out. Friends aired its first season on TV with two Acadian descendants, Matt Livnot and Matt Berry, Mathieu Poirier, two Acadians. In 1994, after recently being released from prison, Nelson Mandela becomes the first black president in South Africa. And in 1994, I was teaching at Upper Canada College in Toronto. Managed to perfect my English language, and I was teaching some of the wealthiest kids in our country. In 1994, my Pepea, I called Grandpa Pepea, at age 83, after a full life, had passed away. So I drove home to New Brunswick, which is a 12-hour drive from Toronto, to attend my Pepea's funeral. As I enter my grandparents' home, because I wanted to see my grandma before the service, my grandma doesn't greet me right away. I hadn't been to the home for some time, but the familiar smells, though, hit me right away. Wood burning, musty carpets, and boiling vegetables on the stove. Grandma is standing by the window. She's waiting to see Pepea come down the path from the shed. Come on in, George. Tu peux rentrer, là. What? It's a little colder, hein? Il fait frais, là. What? The sun is coming down. Mère, t'as pas besoin de parler en anglais. Oh, I know, George, I know. Pepea, he would be glad that you come. All the way from Toronto. Y a-t-il des Français là à Toronto? 60 years together in the same house. Now, my Belliveau, he spoke a beautiful accent. He was always ready for a joke and a story. For someone with a grade 2 education who never learned to read or write, my Belliveau was filled with tacit wisdom. My brother, sister, and I, we would spend hours at my Minian Bellieu's as in our childhood. We'd do small chores around the farm, like taking nails out of fir boards that used to be the barn, and straightening out those nails for a second life. And lunch at Minian Bellieu's was always the same. Boiled hot dogs on fresh buns from the bakery. And then the boiling vegetables that smelled awful could be skipped at the Minian Bellieu's. And then for dessert, the tête de fruit. Translation, Acadian cinnamon buns. And then it was Bellieu's stories. Sitting in his rocking chair, pipe in hand, filling the air with the sweet smell of tobacco and the occasional fart, which would always get my grandma into a flutter. Oh, bastard. And then we'd all laugh because what else can you do? What? Yep. My father, Simeon, with his 2 brothers, they bought the farm. They bought it, the land from the L'Anglais, Fred McGilvery, and then they started the farm. 300 acres of land. They cut the trees, built this house, 1 barn, 2 barns, the potato fields, the animals, and then I took over the farm after my father in the 1940s. And the stories would beget more stories and more stories. Pasteur, it's time for my little nap. Pepeo needs to take a little rest. Grandma, still standing by the window, looking out to the mostly empty fields now. Both barns are gone, no more animals. And the rocking chair sits empty, and the sun is setting. Right, George? Il serait vraiment fier de t'être venu, Pépé. Glad you come home, huh? As I leave the driveway and I look through the rear view mirror, time seemed to have shifted. The house seemed smaller somehow, more empty. The paint seemed less bright and the roof of the shed was sagging. And Pepe and Mamea were no longer in the driveway waving goodbye. So I put on the radio to CKCW Moncton, and Céline Dion was singing The Power of Love en anglais. Now we are stories. We are made of stories. Each one of us has a story. Our birth, coming into this world is a beautiful story. Our childhood, our adolescence, our adulthood are filled with stories. And I know that some of you have shared versions of your story, how you're viewed, interpreted by others. And some of you have shared very intimate stories to trusted ones. And some of you are simply too busy living your stories that you'll tell it later. This is a glimpse of mon histoire. It's the beginning of my ancestral story. It's a quest to uncover and to wonder